right, let's let everyone get into the session. I hope everyone can hear me. And the number of people that are attending are now coming into the session, and we will begin shortly in about a minute or so, and then we'll get going. Thanks for joining, everybody. It's funny how none of us are in the buildings behind us anymore. How ironic. I was thinking about that earlier. I said, here we are, we're taking pictures of all these phenomenal workspaces, which are probably pretty empty these days still with the pandemic, and globally as well. So it's kind of interesting that this session on e-working is being conducted from people's homes with backdrops of big fancy office towers. All right, why don't we get started? Thanks everybody for joining us. My name is Hans Bukow. I'll be introducing our other panelists here in a second. We will be spending the next hour going through the insights that we're gathering about remote working, e-working as I obviously like to call it. And we'll go through some slides and get some points of view and give you a little demo. So it should be a fun packed hour. We'll introduce you as we go along with Lori. As you can see here with her backdrop in Chicago. She's pretty near Chicago. I'm here. I live across the Golden Gate Bridge with a view of San Francisco. And Alan, who will be giving us our demo, is near Miami, which is what you see in his backdrop. So let's get started. I am going to share a presentation that we've prepared for you. Let's see, here we go. Okay. Okay, I think everybody sees my presentation. Just confirming that, yes, yes, looking good, okay. So eWorking, visibility into the new normal era of remote workforces and work. Okay, let's get that. There's two of us today that will be talking about our experiences with eWorking. Myself, I've been a founder of a company called eWork 20 years ago, which went on to do some really cool things, predominantly in the recruitment area for contingent labor. And now with eWork kind of returning to the roots of the original idea, which is really working over the internet. We're going to have a little demonstration that Alan will facilitate and show us the gathering and insights of information from all the collaborative tools. And then we'll have Lori Kevin speaking about her experiences with gathering information to meet the demands of strategic requirements for our executive team. And we'll end up with Q&A from attendants. So if you have any questions, by all means, please put them in the Q&A section. We are leaving that open and we'll formally work for that. We'll be gathering that information and putting it as part of this presentation when we distribute it later on. And also the comments area if you want to make any comments, but ideally, please ask questions in the Q&A section of this Zoom platform. All right, so let's start with this kind of thick slide. And by the way, these will all be used for reference afterwards. So don't worry about reading all the detail. What I've tried to do is put as many links as possible to the content that you'll be seeing in today's presentation. But obviously one of the things we want to hit upon and sort of focus is the massive tailwind that the concept of e-working, digitalized work, knowledge workers is getting from the COVID, from the pandemic that is affecting the world these days. There are several experts out there that have been looking at workplace related and work at home, work from anywhere, remote work, analytics, and the sense is that we will not be going back to the norm or what it was before. I think at the very least, we're going to get a lot more flexible work arrangements, Today, obviously, there are very flexible work arrangements as everyone is been asked to work in isolated quarantine areas for their safety and for other workers' safety. It's estimated, if you take the related information, that we're close to 1 billion people right now working remotely. Previous to this year, last year, it was estimated by Gartner that we were already beyond 1 billion knowledge workers being people that create the most value from digital information, anywhere from software design, obviously web design, models on Excel, digital assets like videos or writing scripts, whatever it might be, things that were easily transmitted digitally and were valuable as digital knowledge information. To sort of fully appreciate that information and that data, there's one of the top subjects that was covered in these references in the top. The top box is mostly for kind of macro views on some of the things that are going on there, McKinsey reports. There's something on infonomics, which is kind of a new area that values data. And as we go to more and more knowledge working as we're all performing, then obviously what is the value of the data assets that are being generated? So I think you'll find that pretty interesting. I did a gathering, an assessment of the business associated with remote working in this new way of digitalized working, as identified in Wall Street Journal, New York Times, some major references are listed in that particular article. And we also have a survey that we'd love to have some people participate in, which is really identifying what we refer to as your eWorking maturity level. How far along are you in terms of collaborative platforms and gathering information and having people literally work through entirely those collaborative platforms? So that's what's going on here. Is most of this is reference information without getting too far into it, but let's just say roughly we have about 1 billion people now that are working very much the way we're working right now, logging in daily, doing Zoom calls and other things. So on the other end, this is a slide, again, very detailed, almost kind of an eye chart. I don't expect everybody to be able to read it off of this particular presentation, but it will be available for you to take a much deeper look. It's obviously a gathering of information, of metrics around what was the remote worker. I believe this was done maybe, oh no, it says here coronavirus pandemic has caused. So during the pandemic, they gathered that information, and it's identifying really work-life balance. Remote working can be a boon to protect productivity. Working attracts and retains top talent. So a lot of very interesting statistics around the actual remote worker and their point of view, and even sort of distribution per those sampled in the amount of income that they're making working remotely. So once again, the link is at the bottom, so you can look at this in more detail later on. So let's take a look a little bit at the innovation. It was one of the promises of this seminar is to look at the sort of innovation that's been driven, accelerated by the pandemic. One of which I wanted to highlight is remote working playbooks. Several companies that have from the beginning worked in this manner, GitLab, TopTal, they have developed some playbooks that identify roles, how to interact, how to break up synchronous and asynchronous work, and other things that make remote working more productive, easier to manage. Second point here, asynchronous versus synchronous tasks. Asynchronous obviously is being able to contribute to the work efforts without having to interact face-to-face on a same time basis. And the more that can be injected into your workflows, the more value you provide. There's an interesting blog that specifically discusses that. And there's some innovation that is obviously increasing as more and more work is being designed so as to be asynchronous. Another area that is accelerating because of the pandemic is this concept of agile. I think very much as we all needed to react to the crisis. There was situational adaptations required. So there's quite a few interesting elements and conversations. McKinsey and others writing about the requirements or the necessity of companies to be much more agile when things such as the pandemic crisis occur. And as we know, in a world that's more interconnected and more turbulent, the ability to react and to move quickly on changes is becoming increasingly more important. The area that I was coming from was in contingent workforces, the ability to hire contractors on demand. And that obviously has also gotten quite a bit of boost from this as people again adapt to ever-changing situations. The other area that we all know technologically is evolving and now made so even more so by the pandemic has been machine learning, looking at patterns and being able to replicate them and have computers learn from the patterns and instill them in their operations, and further downstream even AI as and more intelligence is gathered. And that's part of what we want to contribute here, is gather intelligence around the way people are working so as to contribute more value based on that data that's being gathered. On a more tactical everyday level, here is a very simple, well understandable innovations that came out of last week's Microsoft Ignite conference. They did a lot of communications around their MS Teams platform, which is obviously gathering a lot of momentum. You may note it best as a good public example of it is the Together mode. They have different modes now with which to gather groups, and if anyone's watching the NBA playoffs, that entire panel all around the basketball court is Microsoft's Teams Together mode. As they place people in seats, those are all videos, live videos coming from MS Teams feeds. So a lot of interesting innovation that's coming around these modes. These were announced. Interesting for us here at eWork is there going to be increased workplace analytics that'll be coming out in October, which we will also absorb and make it part of our offerings as well. And again, there are links here all to follow up on this innovation, but clearly the pandemic has accelerated innovation in eWorking. So first question I want to ask is related to a poll, just to get everyone engaged. We want to figure out a little bit more about what you guys are thinking. So give us a little, it's first time trying to do this, so here we go. We're going to launch our first poll question. So if you could answer the question, in the big picture, again, nothing detailed, how much of it do you believe is important? How much is eWorking part of the environment, the world you're living in? You know, just a little bit. Obviously, we made it so that you could spread this around. Is it something that, you know, starting to participate? You know, certain companies, obviously agricultural commodity companies, base a lot of their value on what they're grabbing from natural resources. Other companies require a lot of eWorking for logistics, transportation. It seems like we've got kind of a binary distribution, some that hardly get affected and those that get affected quite a bit. And so about a little bit over half people voted, so we'll just send that out, share the results. So obviously, as we would expect, you know, since you're all here, we do have quite a few people that believe that it's being a pure technology-based company where a lot of knowledge work is the basis of what you do. A lot of people obviously are highly dependent and feel that eWorking is a big part of their value. Okay, let's keep moving. Okay, thanks for that. Take you to the next level. Next slide. Okay. So one of the things that we believe here is this sort of analogy or this correlation. You know, in today's or in the past, you know, we were all very familiar with work and companies producing value from factories, and obviously we made it a little exaggerated with smokestacks, a very traditional looking factory before. And what's going on now? And it's been going on for a while. It's not like all of a sudden the pandemic made this happen, but I think we fully recognize that we could view very much our environment, especially with those of us technology companies that reliant on remote workers or workers from everywhere on their computers, on their digital devices, contributing value, is that they're dispersed. They're going to be dispersed. It's continuing more so. They're all fundamentally working on the internet or this cloud platform that allow us to interconnect and collaborate on many multiple time zones and everywhere. And obviously that brings a lot more different types of talent, diverse talent, into our available pool of candidates and talent to contribute, all collectively working. You could consider that your new virtual factory. The other element, I think, of way of viewing this too is a lot of software companies, especially others in other digital production companies, use what's been referred to as an agile development process. So you can see it on the left here. It's kind of an iterative process, but it's a continuously activity going on where you're brainstorming, designing around those thoughts, throwing some thoughts out, keeping some thoughts in, and then creating a development activity from those designs, making sure that it's doing what it's supposed to do, and then the activity of deploying it, delivering it to clients, and then going through a next iteration. Some companies do this less frequently. Others are doing it almost continuously, releasing and doing commits to the cloud regularly. If you're not sort of keyed in on what I'm talking about, I'm sure everyone who has a digital phone realizes often that it asks to refresh the apps that are on your phone. That is the result of this type of process. In a factory analogy, it's very similar to some of the things that a large factory, automotive factory, any type of factory is doing, but here mapped into the terminology and the methodology associated with what's typical agile development. But the bottom line is agile digital development is a continuous production process. And how is that being performed? Practically, as we designed it or showed it earlier, we've got lots of people, lots of intelligence, lots of ideas and innovation, and they're on their devices, digital devices, laptops, computers, phones, going through a layer of collaborative tools, obviously generating a large amount of digital information, of assets, of files, of programs, of visuals, of videos. But going through that layer of collaborative ability, because obviously it takes more than one person, usually a team of people, to make the entire process operate well, get it to clients, sell it. So obviously a lot of collaborative digitalization going on. We simply summarize that as called it eWorking. So what do we try to do here to eWork? One of the things that we are going to demonstrate today, we are gathering information directly from the platforms that we mentioned earlier, that were listed earlier. These are name brand products these days: Zoom, Slack, Teams, Jira. Monday is the example we have here for project management. All of these systems are gathering quite a bit of information. Some of it is content, but it's storing that content. It's the company's content, but there's a lot of information on interaction. We're gathering it all and putting it into a eWork database. So the next question I want to ask here. Okay, poll question number 2. So how fast is the number and use of cloud-based collaboration tools in your company increasing? I didn't ask just about basic increasing, because I would be very surprised if it's not increasing, but more along the lines of, is it accelerating? Is it getting faster and faster? So this should be a little bit more interesting. We'll wait for about half of the respondents, hopefully, to put in a vote. And again, we'll capture these and put them in the actual slides that we'll be distributing later. So I think the survey says that, we are moving faster than we were before. I think some are exploding, meaning that we're moving a lot faster. No surprise, I would imagine that everyone, because of the need from the pandemic, is going to see an increase. Some about the same speed, others much faster, and then in some cases exploding. I think there's probably a little surprise there, since I would imagine the two categories would be the case here. All right, let's accelerate this a little bit more here. Okay, get back to the screen. Okay. So what we've done is we've taken the collaborative environments that we've talked about, all these cloud platforms, and we've organized it into 3 layers: communications, information collaboration, and then basically plan versus results, the actual work, the release, the things that we know that we're achieving. A lot of the products that you see in the collaborative world are organized in the area. I've given them more of the product names on the right here. And obviously, the closer you get to launching work into having results meet plans, it increases the value. I think very often people confuse that lots of Zoom calls is working remotely or getting work done. It's a very important part of the work, but often there are plans and we need results against those plans. That's the way companies work. So we've organized it into 3 layers, and we're going to talk about that a little bit more. One of the things that we're going to be showing today and that we're still working on is what we kind of refer to as our initial roadmap. We've got 2 elements of that roadmap. One is the eWork productivity intelligence. It's essentially some software that is a large database of information that we're gathering by querying each of the collaborative tools through their APIs around analytics on how things are being performed and how many transactions are being made, work-related transactions, and we gather them for all these layers and put them in the productivity intelligence dashboard. We will then look at that information, develop rules and guidance, intelligence, and then drive bots to send out notifications and help the collaborative work environment perform better. We're working on EPI now. In the future, we'll get to bots. But obviously, before we get there, we need more help from companies with data sets that we can learn from. This is on our website if you want to take a closer look at a later time. So the process in itself is collecting and archiving the information in its raw digital form, conditioning it, as we see here, bringing more shape to it. And then what we refer to as augmenting intelligence onto it, deriving patterns and understandings, analytics from it, and then demonstrating that, showing it based on back to people in the form of insights, and also setting up notifications, notifying the tools themselves that this data came from on triggering actions, changing workflows, so as to feedback control the processes. So this is the macro steps that we're looking at once we do the eWorking data gathering and analytics. As a way to think about this, and it's our first stab at this, we're taking the analysis, looking at trends, sorting, scoring, doing relative comparisons. So you'll see this in this demonstration we're about to show you. So you can imagine that we focus on a certain part of the factory and then gather the information from the collaborative tools that are being used in that part of the factory and show a summary of a score of how the performance is going, how the teams that make up that score are performing, bring it from each of the collaborative tools, watching the trends, is the score going up, going down, and so on and so forth. So it's a very basic way of slicing and dicing the information, and that's the point we're at today. So one other question here quickly. I'm trying to pick up the pace a little bit. I know we don't want to run too late. Let's take a look at the next question. Real quick. How fast is automation, machine learning, AI, and other progressive IT usage increasing at your company? So once again, I think we'd be hard pressed to think that no one is starting to use some of this advancement in technology especially around data intelligence. We're just curious to see how quickly this is moving along. Just wait a few more seconds here. Almost got about 50% of the audience voting. Okay, thank you. So as before, I think we have a situation where the pandemic and other necessities of our times have driven a faster adoption rate. In some cases, people are acknowledging it and moving much quickly. Not at all for some, but I think in general, so we expected that we are adopting these technologies faster because we obviously need more benefit from the data we're gathering. All right, so let's move on to the demo phase here. Alan will take over here in a second. So simply as a demonstration of what we're talking about, we took 4 tools, and primarily because we had some previous experience and we were able to replicate some of the data sets. One of the tricky elements here is having the data sets with which to try to gather and see this information, visualize it, and do some analytics on it. We basically took Monday.com at the project level, project management level, Slack and Jira, 2 very popular tools used often by IT departments and or in Slack cases throughout a company as a replacement for email and doing all of its interaction that way. Both of them also have storing abilities and abilities to launch. But as we know, probably the best tool in the market these days for pure communication at the lowest level, which we're using ourselves here today, is Zoom. All of these products are very progressive, have very solid APIs and provide analytics. We gathered that information and we put it in a eWorking productivity intelligence dashboard. We did that with setting up an AWS platform and also used the Tableau software cloud, several tools to help facilitate that, and obviously give a lot of power to slicing and dicing the information. So from that point, I'll take it. I'll stop sharing and pass it on to Alan, who's going to talk a little bit about the demonstration. Alan.
Thank you, Hans. Welcome, everyone. As Hans mentioned, my name is Alan, and I've been involved in BI for around 20 years. So thank you for joining us today as we bring our vision of to eWork, a way to bring some insight into the applications your company may be using today. The example today will be shown in Tableau, but it just as easily could be in Power BI, ClickView, MicroStrategy, or any other BI tool comparable to those. We start with a summary of company XYZ and its applications it's using. These applications correlate with the areas that were shown earlier in the pyramid diagram we presented. The data we see is at the month level for a period of 12 months. We're currently looking at data for the month of July. If we look at the upper left-hand corner, we see that the overall score for company XYZ is 75. We also see compared to the previous month, we have a positive 4% increase. We will use this format for company, app, and KPI scores. You may be asking yourself, what does an overall score of 75 mean? In this case, it's a score derived from the application scores through a simple scoring method. It could just as easily be a more complex scoring method, one that's developed and adapted to meet your company needs. Hans will speak more to this in the presentation later on. To the right of the overall company score, we see a company monthly trend over a 12-month period. We also see a dotted line and confidence bands. In the middle, we see the applications company XYZ is using and how they contribute to the overall score. Monday at 82, with 8% down from the previous month. Slack at 70, 9% up. Jira 78, 5% up. and Zoom at 74% down from the previous month. You may have more applications or different applications such as Microsoft Teams, Asana, etc. We will work with you to show the apps your company may be using. At the bottom, we see line trends for the company applications for a 12-month period. We can show different months by using the month filter by clicking on the 2 eWork logo here and simply just selecting a different month. So in this case, we were showing July, processing the request, and now we're showing August, right? March. And then back to July. Let's take a look in more detail at the applications. If we look at Monday, we can see that Monday has an overall score of 82 and has an 8% decrease from the previous month. On the left-hand side, we see the KPIs that make up Monday's overall score. Once again, we use a simple scoring method, but working with you, we can have more or less KPIs, different KPIs, and once again, develop the right scoring method for you. In the upper right, we are comparing 2 KPIs over a 12-month period. In this case, task completed versus task created. You can have the flexibility to compare any 2 metrics you may be interested in. Below, you see a comparison of 3 of the teams and how they're doing as it relates to tasks completed. We can see that Team A and Team C are completing more tasks than Team B. There could be a variety of reasons for that. It may be that Team B is of a smaller size. Anyway, it may be something that we need to look into. It's not that obvious, but by quickly applying a trend line, and looking at each team individually, we can see that if we look at Team B, who wasn't completing as many tasks as the other teams, has been performing at a constant rate. So that's a good thing. We'd like for them to be increasing, but constant is not bad. If we look at Team A, we can see that it's on the right track. It's increasing from month 1 through month 12. What wasn't evident before is that as we look at Team C, we can see that it started off pretty well, but it's on a downward trend. So this is the team that we really need to look into and see whether it's 1 or 2 users that are contributing to the downward trend, or if it's just an overall team issue. Let's look at some of the other applications. So if we look at Slack, it uses the same format. Slack is at 79% up from the previous month. We have the KPIs, active users, message read, message sent, private channels, public channels, and how they're trending and what their scores are compared to the previous month. We're also seeing here, we're comparing messages read to messages sent. And below that, we're comparing the teams once again on messages that were read. Once again, we can quickly show the trend lines to see if we see anything outstanding here. We can see that Team B is trending down and the other 2 teams are trending up. Let's move on and look at Jira. So for Jira, Jira is at 78. It's 5% up from the previous month. We have active users, the number of teams, the number of projects, open stories, closed stories, assigned stories, P1 issues, P2 issues, P3 issues. And then we have mean time to acknowledge and mean time to resolve for P1 issues. we're showing here closed stories versus open stories in the KPI comparison. And then we're looking at how each team is doing. We're showing team comparisons, but we could just as easily be showing project comparisons. We could even go down to the user level to see how they're comparing against one another. Once again, let's have a quick look at the trend line and just see that everybody's pretty constant here. And then finally, let's look at Zoom. So we have, once again, active users or a set of KPIs that are providing a score and their trends to the previous month. We're comparing groups and rooms, and also comparing the teams to the number of minutes that each team had. So what I want you to see is that we can configure this to have the KPIs that are most important to you, the visualizations that are most important to you, so that you can gather some insight into the applications that you may be using. So that's just really a quick overview on our application. If we have time, Hans, I can go into the application itself and look under the engine and kind of see the metrics that make up all of this. How are we doing on time?
Yeah, we're running a little bit later than what we had planned, but it all depends on the amount of questions we want to field. I appreciate that. Thanks, Alan. We can also answer questions for anyone offline outside of the webinar. So thanks again. Great to see this, and we'll continue. Okay. All right, so we have another question here for everyone. And let's take a look at another question. This question is related to the facts, data, information used to support your work management related decisions. Obviously, we've gotten a lot of information on remote work and how it's working. What really kicked off this initiative for me was participating in a group where it was with CIOs and tech executives. And the question was, how is remote working now that we're all doing it because of the pandemic? And the answers were mostly okay, I guess. I think that was the telling moment, is when the answers were related to I guess. I've also heard other executives who are obviously talking to their executive management teams, and generally asking how it's going and getting, very positive, optimistic answers, which absolutely we should be, that things are going great. But what does great really mean and relative to what? So often the information are along the lines of sentiments or feelings that we have about how the situation is going. And wouldn't it be great if those feelings were matched by the data on the actual results and actual activities that are being performed that we based out those feelings on? So as we can see here, a little bit more, about half the people again. So in some cases, some to none, mostly rely on gut, is about a quarter of the respondents say that that's how they get things done. Get sentiment from others and combined with my own views. I think that's pretty normal. I mean, I think that's what we're all depending on. Obviously, in this digital era, we are getting more data to take a look at, sometimes indirectly, information that comes from something else that gets you a little bit closer to what you're looking at. And then others, again, being in the tech industry, you would expect this to be a little bit more progressive, rely on business intelligence, data dashboard, KPIs, which in today's world is not as unusual, and I expect will continue to accelerate. Okay, so let's keep moving. The critical element of what we showed earlier, besides gathering the information and conditioning and getting ready, which is a requirement for when you're going to do machine learning or anything where the computer contributes, is augmenting the information. As we showed you in this demonstration, we started with the very basics of trending, sorting, scoring, relative comparisons, archiving, so that information is ready to be mined for more trends and analysis. One of the things that we're considering and looking at, and it has a lot to do with some of the background that I have, my first startup in the 90s, some of you may know, was related to large-scale factory automation. And it was a typical practice in manufacturing, at least in the methodology of something known as statistical process control. And we're looking at, and I mean that right as I said it, we are looking at applying very well-known, understood statistical process control methods, nothing super fancy, but really solid, to this information with which to help control these processes, because we've established that continuous production is what's going on when we look at our agile teams working. If you're familiar with SPC, or maybe you're not, these are production charts that are so.
We're still seeing the survey question answers results on the screen.
So we're augmenting. I don't know if did you see this here before as well? Did we talk about this?
No, we didn't see any of that. We didn't see any of that.
Okay. So re-stepping back here a few slides. When we talked about augmenting, we're taking the data, which you saw in the demonstration, trending, sorting, scoring, relative comparisons. These are basic operations on the data. One of the things that we're looking at doing with the information, which again comes from some of my background related to large-scale factory automation, we did a lot of great work for companies Samsung, Sony, Philips, major manufacturers in applying automated statistical process control to their large-scale automated factories. Again, an important aspect of that was the automation and having the data, and then we applied statistical process control on that information to help do essentially controlling of the manufacturing and make sure that the results were what people had intended. So we're looking at doing the same concept. This is basic technology, well proven, part of everyone's lives that manufacture and get products of high quality into people's hands. Basically, you analyze the information that's gathered, you measure it, you set control bounds on it, you statistically determine whether the processes are within those bounds. And as the processes improve, you literally reset the bounds and provide even a tighter level of control to fully appreciate that the results that you're getting are the results that are intended. This SPC technology is something that we're looking at as augmenting the data that we gather from eWork as applied to these collaborative tools, the transactions that are going on in this continuous activity. It's an innovative way to simply use well-proven, tried technology that's been used in manufacturing to the activities associated with the transactions. We're not talking about the quality of the actual artwork or software and so on. That obviously needs to also be understood, but we're looking at what is typical of your operation, what kind of keeps it humming, keeps it working well, and then looking at that data and applying some basic statistics capabilities to fully appreciate that things are going pretty well, they're improving, they're not, and understanding what this continuous process is doing. If you've never seen these statistical process control elements, these are some of them: control charts, histogram, Pareto charts, often dumped into spreadsheets so that lots of information can be analyzed. This is an anatomy of a control chart. This is histograms associated with dispersion of data once you've measured things. Pareto charts, these are all tools that are typically used in SPC analysis that, once again, we're in the process of evaluating that ability and mapped it onto the data that we're gathering as to provide another extra level of augmented value to the information, and then use notifications, triggers for when things are going out of control and when things are improving, or control limits should be recalculated, recalibrated. Again, it's something that I did for 10 years in large-scale factories, all predicated on data. associated with continuous production. And the idea here is to take some of these practices and apply it to the data that we'll gather as a way to provide value around the activities. So we got about 13 minutes left. I want to introduce Lori. Kevin, she's a VP of Enterprise IT and Security. We wanted to bring her here so as to kind of correlate some of these ideas that we've been presenting into her everyday work life. She's probably one of the best examples of an executive who's been tasked to gather data and do something with it relative to the strategic value, using it as strategic value for the company. So Lori, I'd like to introduce you and welcome you to today's webinar.
Thanks, Hans. So a little bit of background on my organization. I work for Intelligent Medical Objects, Inc., and is the clinical terminology mapping software. And so our software actually identifies a lot of the terms that are used by healthcare providers to be able to enter in search terms to look up a particular symptom or a problem that a patient may have. And then our software does the algorithm to match those up to well-known codes. So certainly no low volume of need for that at the moment right now, given the pandemic. So we have about 290 employees, about 20% prior to COVID were full-time remote. And we do have third-party consultants and contractors as well as full-time employees. We're headquartered out of Rosemont, Illinois, which is a suburb of Chicago with an office in downtown Chicago as well. So we did have some idea and some experience in figuring out how to support that full-time remote, whether it be through onboarding those employees, through proper tooling and access management that we needed to incorporate, but it certainly came to a head when we had to figure out how to get those 80% to a full-time remote position as well, and have been doing so for the last 6 months. So what we had to do was very quickly circle and formulate business continuity execution. Now, that's always been something in the past that companies should have a plan for, and should test, but it's not always that easy. So this was really the first time that we had to put this into practice. And really the focus on that was trying to come up with a way to manage all of our enterprise applications. So having a well-known inventory of all the tools that we're using to communicate, to operate, and to be productive. And then how we coordinate that across all of our teams made up of our operations, which included software engineering, actually includes our terminology solutions teams that are putting out our content, our overall enterprise IT that's responsible for things like Active Directory, onboarding, offboarding, and supporting all of those tools in a centralized fashion. How do we ensure that finance continue to move forward? And then from a chief medical officer perspective, are we doing the right things to make sure that we're collaborating as we get more and more information on COVID? And how then do we take all of those things in a remote fashion and really start to measure our productivity? And I think on Hans, one of your earlier slides, it said, well, how can I tell if my teams are contributing? How can I tell if they're productive? Prior to this, the question would be, well, how do you tell, period? So back in January, what we really moved to was this concept of OKRs, or objectives and key results, which is pretty common now, sort of replacing the old idea of goals. And so really it was trying to figure out if we have these annual objectives, how are we really tracking those in a meaningful way? And what's the tool and visibility in which we can do that? So Hans, if you go to the next slide, we'll kind of talk about that when we're thinking of the proper way for us to really identify what those look like. So at a high level, we'll have an annual objective planning session. And so that's really to understand from our own departments, what are those objectives that we're looking for on an annual basis, whether that be financial, product specific, if it's rolling out new things, if it's reducing costs, right? Those are going to be at that top level objective. And then we're going to have our quarterly key results. Now what we're using for this is all in Jira. So we have that kind of annual objective that we're using to track overall goals for the year. And then key results are tracked in epics as part of Jira. And those are going to be smaller, right, achievable bodies of work that we can then push out to not only specific teams that I'm responsible for, but other dependent teams that are also using Jira as their source of truth for all of the work that they're doing. The tactical work then goes down into stories, which are again going to be smaller pieces of work that can be done within a sprint or as part of Kanban, that we can include more specific acceptance criteria, definition, and then go through the proper workflow within Jira based on our needs. So for example, having something go through a development stage to testing to a review, right? Did we achieve the objective that was laid out for us? And are all these stories really the right things and the right measures to go into the epic that's telling us what we've achieved for the quarter. And then lastly, any of that specific work that needs to be farmed out to specific teams, right, we're doing as part of JIRA tasks. And the way that we do this then, and as we roll up, we can actually look at things by all the way up to that OKR, right? So we can look at, here's all the epics that roll into that one objective. And as I'm reporting back to my boss, I can say, hey, here's the process or the progress that we have made from a percentage perspective based on some custom fields that we can use in JIRA to really be able to show how much we're on track or missing on a quarterly basis and really down to a monthly basis. So when we meet, we're looking at those tasks that roll up to the stories, the percentage of stories that are complete as part of that epic, so that I can report even on a monthly basis as I go and grab a snapshot of that data, that we're able to show 30% done, 50% done, and really kind of have that highlight of red, yellow, green. That's going to be really important for us. So I appreciate the last poll that you took, Hans, in that there's certainly some measurement of how's everybody doing. We're all working remotely. What are some of the anxieties and stress of people, whether they are productive or not, having to deal with e-learning for kids at home or having to have more flexible schedules. But the data becomes very, very important from our standpoint, because it's really the end result and the output that we're looking for to see if we're actually achieving those annual objectives.
Excellent. Yeah, I think that's true. I mean, we all understand that there are a lot of issues that have become part of our new reality of everyone being distributed and not concentrated and located in one location. And time flexibility, asynchronous. A lot of people that are really enjoying this new way of working is they're allowed to fit other priorities into their lives, putting them more in control. From the company's perspective, obviously they need to achieve goals, or they're not going to be around to even provide the ability to give people work and this ability. So it's key that the results are really well understood and the data be there to appreciate where there may be things that need more attention. And we'll talk about how this is all relative to privacy and other issues. I have some questions at the end. So thank you very much, Lori. That was excellent. I think it made it very clear how we've got information coming from the bottom, and obviously the corporate goals of why we're doing everything that we're doing coming from the top. And this way they're able to reconcile and relate to one another in a very productive manner. So appreciate that. Thank you very much for that real world example. So to bring us to the next question, and I promise this is the last one, and we will publish these results. Question number 5. Obviously, we're looking at trying to understand when and how this kicks in. You know, the future of work has always been the future of work. I think now people are realizing they're doing more and more in trying to understand this remote working. And it's not even remote, it's really digital working from anywhere. Many of us were already doing something like this before, wherever we may need. You know, we were working this way whenever we were on business trips. The bottom line is all this information is being captured, presented, organized, and acted on. But how far of it has it gone into an executive level? Is it part of the culture to make sure that all this digitalized way of working has really become much more of the norm for the company, or is it still left as something that each takes care of for themselves, and the company doesn't really take a corporate level interest in making sure that there's a certain standard of performance within the company? So as we can see, it looks like pandemic once again has put some tailwind on the issue. Not quite perhaps at the executive level where a CEO is running around the virtual office mandating that all of these tools be integrated and interconnected. I think it is a natural progression we were seeing before. The pandemic forcing everyone to operate this way more has clearly brought more attention, is driving it. And then we're maybe tackling it at the director or VP level. And obviously, I think we're counting on the fact that the more people see this type of data and get some insights and value, the more perpetuate more demand for it. So thanks very much for answering those questions. Wondering if, Alan, the poll is still there, since I can't tell from here.
The survey question is still up.
Still up, okay. I'm not really sure what.
Hans, it's the slide though, not the poll itself, the slide.
I see, I got it, okay. That's where we'll put the answers later on. So as we get to the Q&A, I wanted to capture, we're going to capture some questions here. If you do have any questions, this is a great time to add them into the Q&A section. These are areas where people can add questions. If you don't have questions, I've actually got some for you that I think will answer some interesting points about what we're trying to do. So we'll do that here in a second. What I wanted to do was also review what the actionable goals of this webinar are. We're in a process right now where we need 3, what we refer to as alpha. Beta would be a little bit downstream in determining specifically what type of feature sets we want from the data analytics. At this point, we are in need of more eWorking data set partners, as we refer to it. Companies that are obviously using tools like the ones we've mentioned, that we would be able to apply our demonstration, make that a little bit more robust, and then operate with these data set partners so as to get insights and to learn quite a bit more on our way to a beta and onto product releases. So I'd like to request everyone here in your networks to see if we can find some data set partners. We have some criteria that we think would be ideal. Operations clearly that have, somewhere in the order of about several hundred digital workers, maybe 500 to 1,000. So corporations that are large enough, doesn't have to be that way, but I think the more we work at that scale, the more appreciation we'll get for the issues that we need to tackle. If you're interested or know someone who might be a good candidate for that, by all means, email me, hans@ework.com. So that's one of the goals. The other goal here is that we've set up several areas around eWorking. We here today, the team that you've seen, including a lot of support that we've gotten from Helbrand, the group out, Helbrand in Soft in the Ukraine. Lilia there, the CEO, she's been extremely helpful. She's seen the vision of the benefits of this, and we have others in Brazil, several other time zones that have been contributing. The idea really is to take this eWorking efforts, make it more of a collaborative, open environment so people can make more recommendations and contribute to how we can all improve on that. We're going to take the recording of this webinar and some other information, and we'll put it on YouTube and distribute the slides in a completed form. And lastly, what I wanted to say is that we all know, especially as exemplified by this pandemic, that there are some major global issues that are ahead of us. And I think one thing that we can think about here as very relevant to that of those challenges is that we need a better eWorking ability. The more we can collaborate and work remotely around the globe, the better chances we have to tackle some of the upcoming very large issues that we're obviously facing. The world is clearly, through the internet and technology, becoming a smaller place, and our ability to eWork with one another is becoming more and more important. So we have a question. Okay, information collected on productivity. The eWork platform is quantity-based. Do you have plans to add objective, quality-based information to data used? Performance appraisals related to rewards. There is research that shows that this can lead to dysfunctional behavior, for example, attending more meetings to rack up. Yes. Yeah, it's a great question. I think in this case, I don't know if everyone can see that question. Is everyone able to see the question at all? For example, attending more meetings to rack up meeting points to simply make more sales calls versus making fewer but better qualified sales calls. This could feed or working harder, not smarter mentality versus the more valued working smarter, not only harder. Yeah, I completely agree. I think the qualitative aspects of the information is as important as the quantitative. I think we're in a phase today, obviously, and I'll write up an answer that we'll put up as part of this, just trying to save a little time, is really just the ability to capture the information and to process it and have a way to analyze it. I think once we develop ways to kind of add quality metrics, we'll add that obviously into it. There is some tools I've seen regarding sentiment determination, people's engagement rates, some really interesting things that some other collaborative products have in place that start to tackle this. We purposefully, in this case, looked at mostly what I refer to as non-soft issues. You know, how many Zoom meetings are too many, causing Zoom fatigue? All these things that obviously can be viewed as different for different people in different circumstances. But I agree. I think setting up the so-called reward as was incentivization here is something that teams will have to decide for themselves on how they want to take the information that they've gathered and you know, provide mechanisms, feedbacks, changes in workflows so as to improve performance for what they deem to be acceptable or appropriate or valuable the way they view it. So very good question. We're starting with gathering information because only insights, better insights come from having the information. And at this point, we've just scratched the surface at collecting eWorking data. Another question I have, if we don't have any other questions, so thank you very much for that, Lori. Another question we have here is, what if my company uses different, and I can't, by the way, I tried put my own questions into this questionnaire, so I'll read them and then we'll add them later. What if my company uses different collaboration tools than those you are showing today? For example, we use Microsoft Teams versus Slack. And by the way, obviously the hour is up, so thank you for all of you who joined us today. We will take some of these questions. If you'd like to stay on, I'll ask these 5 questions, provide some answers, and then we'll conclude this session. And I appreciate you joining us today. Hopefully, we'll see you again as we progress some of what we're doing here to eWork. If you have any questions or any comments or would like to provide feedback, direction, again, this is a collective effort. I would greatly appreciate that. You know how to reach me, hans@ework.com. Again, thank you very much for joining us today. Okay, so for those of you that are still staying on, one question again, as I mentioned, what if we use different collaboration tools? Our goal is to kind of use this initial basic setup. We would connect it to the platforms that are of interest to your company. The more platforms, the better. We bring it all into the data analytics, the business intelligence, and then start kind of looking for trends and analysis in those. As a matter of fact, I could probably share this here. And we can take a look at the questions together, since I did ask them up earlier. So here's some of the questions that I had worked up, thinking that maybe people would be interested in this. Again, the first one I just asked, and the answer really is we'd use a basic setup the way we did, and we would connect it to the other tools. The tools that we're focusing on, the collaborative environment tools, they're very progressive. They're modern day tools, cloud-based, and a lot of them that we've seen so far have very professional APIs. I think they're fully appreciative that they're collaborative with other environments as well. And the APIs are seem quite robust, and we would like to focus on those types of tools versus perhaps some more custom homegrown collaborative environments. Next question is, what level of commitment is needed to be an alpha data set partner? Again, I think important is we come to some joint agreement on the data handling. Obviously, there's security access that would be part of the collaboration. And then we would drive the data that we would collect. This is important to understand that the data is not content data. So we're not trying to make copies of key plans or new product launches or anything to that effect. Data is basic operational interaction data that gives you a sense for how things are performing. We'd also refine the insights that match the client's needs. That would allow us, obviously, to learn quite a bit about how companies would like to use this information, and we ourselves would grow with that understanding and bring that to the general market. So this is a very collaborative effort. The reason I call it alpha is honestly, we're not at a beta level of defining the products. We are looking for data sets because the value of the analytics comes from the value of a large enough data set. So that's what we're in the process of collecting. Do you work with any other business intelligence platforms? Absolutely. The idea really is that, as Alan mentioned earlier, if we have a professional enough BI tool set, Microsoft Power BI is obviously quite popular. There are lots of other BI products that are quite comprehensive. We would use your BI as a way to provide the information back in a method that an alpha company is interested in. I'm sure larger companies will have some standards in that area, and we would obviously work with you in that way as well. What about data security inside the eWork productivity intelligence module? It's a great question. Right now, we're obviously doing everything as securely as we can. We're using AWS, but other professional grade, enterprise grade cloud products have secure capabilities. Important to note that we're not interested really in the actual specific content of companies' value of their intellectual property. That's not what we're talking about capturing here. It's very much to measure the activity, this continuous process that is part of your so-called new factory, and then bringing value to how to analyze that information so that you can get a better answer to when asking the question, how's it going? The last element is, how is eWork's EPI different from desk monitoring software? As we all know, during the pandemic, there was an increase in desk monitoring, endpoint, several different names, digital experience platforms. So these are platforms that have helped corporations appreciate how their workers, people that contribute to their value, are operating at their laptop. You know, they're getting good enough bandwidth. Are the apps having trouble, especially through VPNs or other setups that companies have put in place to make it easier or to make it more secure? We're not doing that. We're not looking to try to monitor your desktop. We're not looking at all the apps that you're opening up. We don't care if you're on Netflix or shopping at Amazon. I think the positive view here is to monitor the collaboration efforts from standard APIs that the collaborative tools provide, so as to really kind of ask questions and get insights around the work being performed. As we go more and more asynchronous, it'll be less about seeing and experiencing someone sitting at their desk for a certain amount of time, or be available, unless required by their work, obviously, to be at their desk at a certain amount of time or available. That obviously brings a lot of stress to the performance. What we're really gauging is the work that's being produced, the results, the value that's being created, especially as we have to plan for that work and appreciate how much resources and time it takes to get that work achieved. So it's a lot to do with planning. It's a lot to do with information that's being gathered. It's typical of what you would expect when we're all collaborating with one another. It's really not about Big Brother and watching out for whether someone is spending too much time on Netflix. The bottom line is, if they're doing that, they're obviously going to have much more difficulty in achieving the work that they're expected to, and that they've hopefully worked that out with management and others that are collaborating with them to collectively as a team. And that information ideally is fed back into the team, so everyone grows and performs better and understands where they stand, or when they need to put a little bit more effort in, or when they can obviously afford to take their foot off the accelerator. So these are some of the questions that I wrote up earlier. We'll post them as well. If you have any further questions that you'd like to be included in part of this package, I'd appreciate that. We'll make this available for everyone. Let everyone know where you can find the content and information. And with that, I want to thank my fellow panelists on this today. I appreciate it. I think it went pretty well for our first one. I do appreciate Zoom's a pretty good tool. I was able to learn and operate this all in a couple of days. So hopefully all of you are also producing some good information for the rest of us to benefit from. And with that, thank you. eWorking on eWorking, and appreciate it for everyone that's still around. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, Hans. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks.